Welcome to another episode of What's the Deal? And today is going to be a pretty interesting one with a little bit of a history lesson in it, as we're going to be talking about buyer focused selling. We're going to look at the journey as to how that has evolved and why it's still so important. There's nothing brand new, and why it's really, really important for organizations to adopt that methodology or philosophy. Let's go. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another episode of What's the Deal? And if you're meeting me for the very first time, my name is Lyndon Braffett, and What's the Deal is a sales and marketing series where we are actually going to be focusing on what's the deal with some of these terminologies, processes, everything as it relates to sales, what's buzzing now in the space of marketing, how marketing is going to be supporting sales, because I'm not a marketer, as I like to tell people. But at the end of the day, as a sales leader, I expect marketing to be able to support me. So I want to reach out to say, Anissa Collymore, good morning to you and welcome. Thanks for the shout out. Mr. Kali Prasad, Gregory Kali Prasad, good morning and welcome to What's the Deal? Excuse me. How are things with you all at present? So what are we talking a little bit about today? Well, over I'll say maybe the last few years, there has been a concentrated effort or conversation around the term customer centricity, buyer centricity, buyer focus this, buyer focus that. And there have been some different iterations as it relates to things about the buyer. Now, while that is cool and they are all very relevant, my objective today is really to share with you all that buyer-focused selling or buyer-focused marketing isn't really a new thing, but it is still very relevant. So I'm going to take you all through a particular history lesson. I'm going to be sharing some resources from when I was first introduced to buyer-focused selling and what exactly that is. And I'm actually going to be sharing with you all, maybe pointing you all in the direction of some resources that I think are really, really excellent to at least start getting your feet wet into what this buyer-focused sales and marketing is all about, right? So I want to start with this. Let me see how I can bring this in, right? So if you are familiar, so Gregory, Anissa, and anyone that may be paying attention on your respective platforms, I'm going to be asking questions throughout this session. So I want us to pay attention to see if this creates any kind of alignment with us whatsoever. So I want to take you all back, as I say, on a little particular history lesson, right? Normally, when we are told to sell, when we are taught to sell, we are taught to sell specifically from the standpoint of the product. So there's a lot of conversation on the product. We must understand what our products are, what our services are, what our solutions are. That's how I started off in 2003. And it was very product centric. But we have to remember that we are selling to people. But we only paid attention to the people sometimes when we were actually engaging them. And because we never had that level of centricity or focus before on the buyer, we only focused on what the buyer was actually saying in the transaction. But that turned out to be a horrible approach. And I only learned that. I was sharing that with with a group that Jared introduced me to earlier this week. Um, that turned out to be a horrible approach because you tend to realize that it is not always was never the best approach in terms of selling. Like selling just being a box salesperson or a solution or a software salesperson, all you are familiar with is that brand of equipment or the brand of your organization, but never the needs of the customer. Over time, however, somewhere around the space of 2003 and a little bit earlier, I remember being introduced pretty early to someone and also a training session, planting a seed in my mind about buyer focused selling. But I want to share with you all now as to what the first version of that looked like to me, and then show you all as to where that comes from. And I'm going to be starting that off from the early 2000s, and I'm going to be properly introducing it into your. I want you to pay attention to this from the standpoint of how can I incorporate this, even if you're not in sales and you want to introduce it to your sales team, or you're an entrepreneur and you want to introduce it into your business. How can I now follow some of these formats and bring this into my space? All right. So let's look at this. We want to pay attention to this. So I actually saw this in the early 2000s. All right. And this was, for me, the creator is unknown, right? I wasn't sure. As a matter of fact, I think I saw it when Xerox, Xerox may have introduced it. So Xerox copiers. But for me, as I say, it's unknown because it was never really a firm thing. But if you pay attention to really and truly what this is saying, the focus here is really on the buyer. And this was the early 2000s. But at around this time, we were still, at least for me, we were still really selling. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even sales yet. So let me just kind of backtrack a little bit. The early 2000s, this was introduced. I may have seen this somewhere around the period of 2008 or 9. But the conversation with this started to happen in the early 2000s. And if you pay attention to what is it that they have here, whoever put this together, you notice that they didn't focus this on the product nor the company whatsoever. They didn't focus on the company, they didn't focus on the product. And back in the day, how we were selling from the standpoint of, well, my organization is this, and we will do this for you, and we have so many years of service, and that's why we are the best. But that sometimes means nothing to a customer. What this is highlighting to us is that the main focus, if we look at what's in the center here, should really be on the buyer, right? So it has the buyer to the center and all of the salesperson's respective activities. But what they did in the center here was really focused on the different changes that a buyer may actually go through. Now, if you're looking at this, you could definitely tell this was old school because of the, like, this could have been done in WordPerfect or something like that, right? So it's definitely old school, right? So this was my first introduction to buyer centricity. But I'll be honest with you, as much as I saw it the very first time, it didn't sync with me, right? It did not sync with me because, again, being so ingrained in terms of product, and just pitch all the features of the thing, never really focusing on what are the different stages that the customer is actually going through as it relates to making an investment or making that final decision on this, right? However, in 2011, as the seed began to germinate in my mind about changing the way that we sell, I was introduced to Kevin F. Davies' book, and this was a 4-disc audio CD, even though he had it as a book, called Getting Into Your Customer's Head. And this blew my mind. Why? Because of the fact that as much as this is very similar, and I'll talk about the similarities in a bit, Kevin took the time to really break down each stage of the processes on both sides. So what you're looking at here, if you notice, on the outskirts in the black spaces, you will have, you're seeing need, learn, buy, value. Need, learn, buy, value. Those are the things that we should be doing at the different stages as a sales professional. If we look in the inside, if we go in the smaller circle on the inside with all of the color variations, you will see some things in there that says change, discontent, research, comparison, fear, commitment, expectation, and satisfaction. What really caught me with this is because what I just called out there are the different mental stages that customers go through while making a decision on a transaction. Whether you're buying a car, whether you're buying software, whether you're in an organization, so it's different teams that's coming together to make a decision, everyone starts off with some sort of change driver, some sort of trigger, whether you want to improve on something or you have some equipment that's actually old, whether it's an old car, whether it's an old piece of software, whether you need to upgrade your PBX, the customer has to evaluate that change. When you look at the outskirts now, where it says student, doctor, architect, coach, therapist, negotiator, teacher, and farmer, what Kevin is indicating there that we do as sales professionals, as entrepreneurs, as practitioners in our space, is we adopt these different roles to represent how we should be approaching the customer at every stage of the sales process. Now, again, this blew my mind. So let me move it forward a little bit, right? Because this, it may not be the clearest one from a graphical standpoint, but I want you to pay attention to the steps if you all can see the steps properly, based upon where you are looking at this from. You notice that this here is on the buyer. So this is saying that the buyer goes through some sort of change, right? So what changes are occurring in the buyer's environment? The other one is discontent, right? Like, how serious is this problem? And that discontent is also a trigger as to how the customer may want to go forward or not go forward. I may have to put us on a little bit of pause here. All right, just bear with me 1 minute. Sorry. All right, sorry about that. We just had to make sure I had the battery because the battery is extremely low, so I would have died in the middle of the stream. So, all right, so when we're looking at when the buyer is concerned, his main focus now is the discontent. And as I was saying, when you're looking at discontent mainly means that your customer, if the problem isn't that serious, they are not going to do the transaction now. And as a sales professional, where do you need to be in that particular mindset? The other one is research. Based upon how serious the problem is, what levels of research does the customer have to go through? Where are they going to be doing that research? And I'll tell you why this is so important shortly. The other one is comparison. Who is your customer comparing you to? Again, if we are putting ourselves as the customer, we know that before we make a decision, we are Googling stuff, we are looking at 2 or 3 options, we are assessing, and we even looking at reviews. So we also have something called fear. Now, if it's based upon the size of the change, if it's a total change, sometimes it's switching brands, you're changing locations, whatever it is, customers may have a fear. And how do we as sales professionals now manage that fear? How do we as sales professionals manage that fear towards helping the customer say, no, you're going to be okay, you're making the right decisions, this is how we're going to go about doing it? And then, of course, you have that commitment where they're now saying, you know what, you've answered all my questions, you've checked all my boxes. I totally love exactly as to what you've shown me so far. I am ready to move forward. And then they go through that process of expectation, and that expectation is exactly what you said that you were going to give to them, is it, or what they were going to receive is exactly what they got. So it performed, or you performed, or your product performed as specified. And the last one is how satisfied they are. Those 8 stages represent 8 stages in your buyer's journey. The sweet part about it is what Kevin was actually now able to do is now align that to a sales process. So while you are looking, and what the one point I want to make here is that this that Kevin did was the early stages of a customer's journey. I'll say that again. So when you're hearing things about mapping out the customer's buying journey, this is what they're talking about, because this is your guide to the buying journey, from when they have that change that's happening in their particular space to the discontent, especially when you're looking at things as to the research. Where are they going? Who are they speaking to? Who are their influencers? This represents the customer's buying journey. And as a sales professional or as an organization, your team, or you, even as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to match that. Now, when I say match that, if you look at what's on the right-hand side of this particular graphic, the far right, it may not be 100% visible, but you would see their words there like the student, the doctor, the architect, the coach, the therapist, the teacher, and I can't make out the very last one, right? But that definitely, that in my space, actually, I got my notes right here, right? And the farmer, the last one represents the farmer, right? And that the farmer would represent nurturing your customer for additional business. Now, again, if it is that we are looking at what this is saying to us, Kevin broke down, and again, we're talking about this was in 2011 when I first got the audio CDs, and I think it may have come out a year before that. He broke down how sales professionals should be selling. At that time, too, we weren't even thinking how marketers should be aligning themselves to sales. But he was just saying how sales professionals, should be selling to their customers by taking a buy learning approach. However the customer is buying is how we want to align our sales process to that. And this is where he aligned the two. So on the left-hand side in black and white is where the customer goes through that process of buying. And on the right-hand side is where the salesperson has to align his, her, or their sales processes to align. Now, why is this so impactful in the sales world? Because with this, we learn to not sell too fast. I'll say that again. With this, we learn to not sell too fast. That's why Kevin also has another book that's called Slow Down, Sell Faster. Slow down, sell faster. So this here was our guide to for sales representatives to understand, wait a minute, I need to understand first and foremost how important this change is to the customer, because I might be trying to force a customer to buy something and they don't even think that it's that important to get right now, because the need may be latent or it may just be unimportant. They know that they need it, but now is not the time. So should I be putting all of my emphasis, all of my focus to try to sell to this customer right now if I realize it's not that serious of a problem to the customer? Those are the things that this started to help myself and my team do. Let's go forward a little bit more. Then we have HubSpot's Flywheel, right? So we started off with Xerox. So we started off with where I showed you all Xerox came into the mix with this particular graphic. And again, on the outside represents the salesperson. On the inside represents the buyer, which is your customer. And you'll notice that between this and Kevin Davies' illustrations, they are very, very similar. Did Kevin have an influence of it, or did Xerox have an influence in what Kevin is doing? I don't know, but we know that that is how things goes, right? Before I go in, let me just acknowledge Michelle Grant's comment. So Michelle is saying, I recently had a lady sell to me, all right, talked She's saying that she talked over me the entire time, didn't even ask one question to figure out how her product could potentially even benefit me or even to find a need. Needless to say, she didn't buy, right? And Michelle, you know what? You didn't have to buy from her, you know, because she is a product pusher. Sometimes we call them commission breath because they're only focused on pushing, 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 pushing. And without taking the time to understand why you even in the store or why we even having this conversation, you're going to reckon these are not the kind of people that you want to be facilitating you in any kind of transaction. It's unfortunate because that's what we have in the industry still. But that's what we're trying to change with sessions like these, you know? So let's take a look now as to where HubSpot came in. So HubSpot introduced something called the Flywheel. So this is version number 3 of a flywheel and a buyer-focused approach to selling. The thing is with this is that this is where HubSpot also started to introduce marketing to the mix. Now, this was in 2018. The funny thing too is that HubSpot did not always have this as their process. So HubSpot started off with a process that was very, very linear, a very, very funnel approach that we all understand, which is sales, marketing, service. Or you prospect the customer, you have the meeting, you know, you just take that linear approach towards your sales process. However, over time, they recognized that for them to be able to grow or for their business to get better, they needed to have a different approach. And that different approach for them meant that they had to ditch the flywheel and adopt the buy learning approach. So they had to take now, they had to ditch the funnel and pick up the flywheel. Here's the cool thing with this though. The flywheel really focuses now on the same things that I would have just shown you all with Kevin Davies. So the same way that Kevin Davies broke down how you align certain things as it relates to the customer, this is now saying as an organization, because this one is now specific to the sales professionals. This here now is indicating that as an organization, we need to now factor in marketing, all of our marketing, sales, and service activities around the customer. They even went one step further by indicating that if we are looking at growing and growing with our customers, we can now use this approach to do what? Use marketing to help attract those visitors to our websites or to our social platforms, convert those actual leads into legitimate prospects where the sales people are now going to be able to, interact with them better. And by interacting with them, the sales teams can now adopt that Kevin Davies approach by identifying the needs, understanding where the customers are, right? Convert those people that you just had as prospects into customers, and now you support them in such an amazing way that they become your promoters. Customer-focused selling or buyer-centric selling, or the first one that we don't have a name for, which I think it was called the buyer sales approach, is where all organizations should be right now. Whether you are an entrepreneur, you have to be focusing 100% on your customer. Whether you're a sales professional or a marketer working within an organization, you need to be doing things to start highlighting, the needs of your customer. Yeah? And again, I want to just go back to emphasize my point, right? That what you're seeing here is not brand new because it started off here. And again, as I say, this is where Kevin started to focus on what are the immediate needs of this customer? Where are they in the actual journey? But where we know in 2018 is that you have an organization like HubSpot is saying, listen, if we've recognized, even for our business, if we want to be able to grow, we have to centralize all of our work or everything that we do on the customer. We have to start educating the customer. We have to start answering questions even before they come to us. Because remember, and you're going to find me flipping back and forth here because I want to really sink the point in. Remember that the customer goes through a journey where they are going to be doing research. And that research, which is step number 3, that research is what will fix my problem. And in some of our instances, that what is not just a what, but which company is going to fix my problem, right? Which provider am I going to be taking to fix my problem? But because so many things have changed now, and we need to now start incorporating all of our departments into the mix, how do we now incorporate marketing to help support sales, to help support service, and also, most importantly, to support the customer? And that is where now HubSpot's Flywheel, as at 2018, is maybe the most modern version of this. That is why I felt that it was so important for me to share this with you all today. Because buyer focused selling isn't new, but is not something that we do a lot of. I still encounter people who are product pushers. I still encounter people who are box salespeople. I still encounter organizations who are just relying on their brand and their tenure and how long they've been around as a convincing mechanism to get customers to buy. Not recognizing that our customers' needs are changing, the way that our customers are going about purchasing things, the way that they're going about making decisions is very, very different. And if we pay attention to any one of these, we will see that there has been a transition from one into the 2011 and then from 2011 directly into 2018. And basically what HubSpot has been able to do, I don't know if they know that they did this. But again, this is just because I personally study sales or study the business of sales. They've basically incorporated everything that Kevin did here in 2011 and brought that into an inbound sales and marketing methodology. I'll say that again. What HubSpot did, whether they know it or not, is that they incorporated everything that Kevin Davies spoke about and wrote about in 2011 and incorporated that now within their technology and now with their philosophy of inbound marketing and inbound sales. And that is why, again, too, because of the fact that we have the internet, we have all these little different things, we also need to we still have to focus on the needs of the customer. Capturing the customer's interest very early, but capturing the customer's interest based upon what they are trying to achieve, not just what we want to sell. So even if you do have a website, like last night I was just kind of reviewing a customer's website in preparation for a meeting next week. And everything about the site is all about their product. They do not speak about anything as to the lifestyle change that this particular product or solution can have, the impact it can have, how it can benefit their business. Nothing. It was just all about, this is who we are, this is my team, yada, yada, yada. They answer no questions. They raise no serious issues. They do not, and that is a bad way of building trust, because you don't have a website for having a website's sake. And because you're not doing that, you are now not becoming that digital authority to start now capturing those leads online and bringing them into your space. And I guess so again, guys, that's why I felt it was really important to share this, because buyer focused selling is a thing. It's been around for a while, and we still don't put a lot of emphasis on it today. I don't know when that's going to happen, but it's something that I do. Everything that I do, and I could also say this, it's sometimes a struggle as a coach, because while we may try to encourage a customer to adopt this approach, because the approach takes time. When I say time, I mean it's a mental shift for the sales professional and the organization. Yeah, you tend to find that it's easy now to kind of go back into the norm and just go out there and find the customer and just try to hard sell them. That's not going to work. Yeah, inbound takes time, or taking a buyer-centric outbound approach takes time, but it's something that you have to focus on. And I'm pretty certain, even if HubSpot doesn't do it, maybe in the next few years, so look at it, within 20 years, we've had 3 versions of this thing. Look at that. Within 20, and let me say it like this. Within 20 years, I have seen 3 versions of this. I don't know how long. I don't know if there are other versions of it before the early 2000s. And if any of you all that's seeing this now or seeing this later has has any sort of inclination of if there was something before, feel free. Let me know. Share it with us. Share it with us. Because again, taking the time to adjust the way that we sell is extremely important now in 2022, right? And adopting more technology to help you be better at what you do in this space is important. Yeah. So that's my time. But I have one cool thing I want to ask you all. Right. So I really do hope that that would have resonated with you all in some way, form, or fashion. As I said, it's an important aspect of growing your business. When you focus more on your buyer, we already know as to what we do from a product or service centric standpoint. But now just taking that fixed approach and building on that from there is extremely important. All right. I would always recommend getting Kevin Davis book or audio CD and really working your team and helping them understand that. And then now looking at what HubSpot has been doing with inbound sales and marketing methodologies to really now encapsulate everything within that system. Because the two are aligned, even though they're about 7 years apart. Yeah. So I have one last question for you all, and I'm not sure who's going to be able to answer this, and you may not be able to answer this now. So this is at the end of the presentation. I will trivia. How many gray slides did I have in this slide deck? So as I'll end this with a question. You all can put your response in the comments, right? How many gray slides did I have in this slide deck? All right, guys. So marinate on that a little bit. Maybe you might have to go back and scrub through to look at it again to see if you could answer the question. But I'd love to see if you have your comments in there. Have a great Friday. You enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a great weekend. And I'll catch you all next week Friday with another version of What's the Deal. All right, take care. Peace.